There is a moment in every survivor's journey when the truth becomes impossible to ignore. Narcissists do not mellow with age, they harden. While healthy adults grow softer, wiser, and more grounded, the aging narcissist grows sharper, colder, and more unpredictable. It's a psychological paradox most people never see coming. We're taught to believe time makes people better, that age brings perspective, that maturity reshapes character. But with a narcissist, the opposite is true. Time does not heal them, it exposes them. Their charm wears thin. Their mask becomes heavier, their insecurities deepen, and the emptiness they've spent decades outrunning finally begins to close in on them. That is when they become truly dangerous. Not because they gain power, but because they start losing the illusions that once held them together. When a narcissist ages, they are forced to face the one enemy they've avoided their entire lives, themselves, and instead of growing, they fight. Instead of reflecting, they cling. Instead of evolving, they double down on everything that has already destroyed their relationships, their reputation, and their humanity. This video is not about shaming them. It is about revealing the psychological mechanics behind this dark transformation so you can protect yourself. Because if you've ever wondered why the narcissist in your life feels more controlling, more bitter, more entitled, more volatile with every passing year, what you are seeing is not random. It is the predictable collapse of a personality that was never built on truth. And once you see these signs clearly, you'll understand something even more important. Their danger does not come from who they are. It comes from who they refuse to become. Let's begin. Most people assume aging brings humility, perspective, and emotional maturity. But aging does not transform a narcissist. It exposes them. Time is not their teacher, it is their mirror. And the older they get, the more merciless that mirror becomes. In youth, a narcissist can hide behind charm, appearance, ambition, or social momentum. They can distract themselves with relationships, careers, drama, or the endless pursuit of validation. But as the decades pass, each of these shields weakens. Beauty fades, patience from others runs out, opportunities shrink, social circles become smaller, their ability to reinvent themselves diminishes, and worst of all, their internal story, the one where they are always the hero, collides with the undeniable reality of their choices. A healthier person would use this collision as fuel for growth. They would self-reflect, make adjustments, take responsibility. But a narcissist cannot do this. Their ego was built on avoidance, not awareness. Their identity depends on denial, not truth. So instead of evolving, they double down. Instead of softening, they harden. Instead of becoming wiser, they become more rigid, more defensive, more paranoid, more controlling. The psychological mechanism is simple but devastating. The older they get, the fewer places they have left to hide from themselves. That is why their behaviors intensify. Their charm weakens, so they resort to intimidation. Their supply dwindles, so they manipulate more aggressively. Their insecurities deepen, so they lash out with greater cruelty. Their world shrinks, so they cling tighter to whoever is still around. And because they have spent a lifetime avoiding self-awarenessness, they lack the emotional tools necessary to face aging with grace. What you are witnessing is not them getting older, it is their entire psychological structure cracking under the weight of unaddressed wounds, unexamined patterns, and unresolved shame. This is why an aging narcissist can feel so much more suffocating, unpredictable, or hostile than they did years ago. They are not evolving, they are collapsing. And rather than confront that collapse, they project it outward. Their war is not with you, their war is with the truth they refuse to face. You simply become the closest target. Sig 1. They give up on love and shift to power. In the early years of a narcissist's life, love is not truly love. It is bait. It is performance. It is a carefully crafted illusion designed to secure admiration, validation, and emotional obedience. They mimic affection the way an actor mimics a role, convincingly but without depth. But as narcissists age, something fundamental changes. The illusion becomes harder to maintain. The emotional labor required to fake love becomes too exhausting, too inefficient, too slow compared to the immediate gratification of control. And so they quietly abandon the facade of love altogether. This is the first unmistakable sign of danger. An aging narcissist stops pretending to love and begins demanding to be obeyed. They no longer bother with warmth or charm, they no longer sugarcoat their entitlement, they shift from seduction to domination, from flattery to authority, from emotional appeal to psychological force. To them, love becomes irrelevant because love requires vulnerability, reciprocity, and accountability. 3 things the narcissistic ego cannot tolerate. So instead of trying to connect, they claim ownership. Instead of nurturing relationships, they police them. Instead of building closeness, they enforce hierarchy. The older they get, the more openly they treat people not as partners or companions, but as possessions, extensions, tools, and emotional servants. And this shift is not subtle. It is felt in tone, in presence, in everyday interactions. The warmth that once existed, manufactured or real, turns cold. Conversations become commands, requests become obligations. The relationship stops being a connection and turns into a power structure. The reason this becomes so dangerous is simple. When they were younger, they feared losing you. They feared losing status. They feared losing the relationship because it still fed their ego. But with age comes a twisted confidence. You need me more than I need you. This belief gives them permission to escalate behaviors they once kept hidden. Criticism, manipulation, intimidation, passive-aggressive punishment, silent treatment, controlling your choices, invading your privacy, rewriting your intentions, erasing your feelings. They begin to treat you not as a partner, but as property. And property does not get respected, property gets used. This shift also reveals something deeper happening internally. Their emotional capacity is shrinking. Whatever fragment of warmth they once had is fading, replaced by resentment, frustration, and bitterness. They resent the world for not bending to them. They resent aging for stripping away their advantages. They resent you for needing what they cannot give. And so they cling to the only thing they believe they still possess: power. But this power is not strength. It is the panic of someone losing control of their narrative. It is the desperation of a person whose inner world is collapsing faster than their outer world can compensate. And when a narcissist clings to power, they do not do it gently. They do it forcefully, strategically, ruthlessly. You become the battlefield where they fight the war they refuse to wage inside themselves. This is why the first sign is the most crucial. Once a narcissist gives up on love, they no longer pretend to be human. They become a ruler in their own mind, and everyone around them becomes a subject. And no subject is ever truly safe. Second, they don't learn from their broken relationships. A narcissist's life is filled with patterns. Patterns they create, repeat, deny, and ultimately drown in. And one of the clearest markers of danger as they age is this: they do not learn from a single broken relationship they've ever had. Not one. Their past is littered with burned bridges, shattered friendships, estranged family members, failed romances, and destroyed partnerships. Yet in their mind, these are not lessons. They are injustices, they are betrayals, they are proof that the world is flawed. Not them. When a healthy person experiences relational failure, even if they were wronged, they eventually step back and reflect. What was my role in this? What can I do differently? But a narcissist interprets every rupture through a single lens. Someone did this to me. With age, this belief becomes cemented. They rewrite history with each passing year, turning themselves into the misunderstood hero and everyone else into villains, weaklings, or disappointments. This rewriting does not stay in the past. It shapes their present. Because if every failed relationship was someone else's fault, then every future relationship is also someone else's responsibility to maintain, repair, and endure. They feel entitled to connection without investment, loyalty without reciprocity, love without accountability. This is why older narcissists become more rigid, more defensive, and more morally self-righteous. They've spent decades avoiding self-awareness, so now they cling to a black and white worldview that protects them from the unbearable truth. They are the common denominator in every story they refuse to examine. This is where the danger intensifies. The longer they avoid responsibility, the more distorted their perception becomes. And distortion breeds hostility. Anyone who challenges their narrative becomes an enemy. Anyone who holds them accountable becomes toxic. Anyone who sets a boundary becomes selfish. Their thinking becomes so polarized that they lose the ability to differentiate disagreement from betrayal, feedback from attack, consequences from persecution. This creates a psychological environment where every conflict is an injustice, every mistake is someone else's fault, every discomfort is sabotage. And because aging naturally brings more relational failures, divorce, family distance, adult children pulling away, colleagues outgrowing them, the narcissist's narrative becomes darker, tighter, more paranoid. They do not interpret loss as a wake-up call. They interpret it as ammunition, evidence that they must protect themselves by tightening control, raising demands, rewriting stories, and attacking anyone who threatens their fragile ego. As the years accumulate, their introspection capacity shrinks into nothing. They stop asking, "Why did this happen?" and replace it with, "Who do I blame?" You will see this in the way they talk about their past. Every ex-partner was crazy, every friend was ungrateful, every co-worker was jealous, every family member was problematic. Eventually, they build a worldview where they are the lone righteous figure surrounded by incompetence, betrayal, and disappointment. And once they believe this fully, they stop trying to relate. They only try to rule. This is why their relationships become colder, shorter, and more combative with age. They are not learning, they are calcifying. They are not maturing, they are hardening. And the harder they become, the more dangerous they are to anyone still emotionally attached to them, because a person who refuses to learn from their past will always repeat it. But a narcissist will repeat the pattern and make you pay for it. Sig 3. They reject their shadow self. Every human being carries a shadow, the unseen parts of themselves that hold old wounds, buried fears, unconscious insecurities, forgotten mistakes, and unresolved shame. According to Carl Jung, the shadow is not the enemy, it is the doorway to growth. When embraced, it becomes wisdom. When denied, it becomes poison, and the narcissist denies it more fiercely with age. In their youth, they can run from their shadow fast enough to outrun the consequences. They can blame, distract, seduce, charm, escape, reinvent, but as time passes, the shadow grows heavier, louder, harder to escape. It demands attention, it demands healing. It demands truth, and that is exactly what the narcissist cannot and will not face. So instead of acknowledging their shadow, they exile it, they banish it, they pretend it does not exist. But the shadow does not disappear when ignored. It mutates. It becomes bitterness, it becomes resentment, it becomes emotional volatility and subterranean rage. You will see it in every interaction, their patience thinning, their tolerance shrinking, their reactions sharpening. Small inconveniences trigger disproportionate anger. Innocent comments become insults, neutral situations become threats. Because the shadow they refuse to face inside themselves becomes the monster they fight outside themselves. The older they get, the more that hidden, unprocessed darkness starts leaking out through their behavior. It shows up as unpredictable mood swings, cold detachment, contempt, cruelty, passive-aggressive sabotage, or sudden eruptions of hostility. Not because you triggered them, but because life itself is triggering them. Aging confronts them with everything they have spent a lifetime avoiding. Regrets they can't undo, mistakes they can't rewrite, relationships they can't salvage, truths they can't silence. And instead of metabolizing these emotions, they project them. Their internal chaos becomes your problem. Their shame becomes your fault. Their unresolved past becomes your battlefield. This is why being around an aging narcissist often feels unsafe, unstable, emotionally exhausting. You're not interacting with a person, you're interacting with a psyche at war with itself. But here is the deepest layer. The more their shadow grows, the more their persona, the mask they show the world, cracks. They know, even if unconsciously, that they are becoming harder to love, harder to tolerate, harder to respect. And because they cannot face that truth, they turn it outward as aggression. The shadow they reject becomes the weapon they use. The shadow they deny becomes the mood they inflict. The shadow they refuse to heal becomes the emotional atmosphere of the home. This rejection of the shadow is what makes them increasingly dangerous with age, because a person who cannot face themselves will always harm the people who do. And the older they get, the more desperate they become to avoid the mirror. And the more desperate they become, the more destructive they are to anyone still standing close. Signal 4. They inflate superiority and deny humanity. With age, something remarkable and frightening happens inside the narcissist psyche. The gap between who they truly are and who they pretend to be widens beyond repair. Their accomplishments shrink, their relationships falter, their relevance fades, and reality starts contradicting the grand story they've always told themselves. But instead of adjusting the story, they amplify it. Instead of becoming more humble, they become more grandiose. Instead of acknowledging their limitations, they deny them with even greater intensity. Aging confronts them with their humanity, and their humanity terrifies them. So they do the only thing their fragile ego knows how to do: inflate. They create exaggerated personas to compensate for the shrinking of their real life. They elevate themselves in conversation, boasting about intelligence, morality, strength, experience, influence, anything that keeps the illusion alive. They cling to superiority because without it, their identity collapses. And the older they get, the more desperately they need this illusion to survive. This is why older narcissists seem more arrogant, more dismissive, more condescending than ever before. It is not confidence, it is not power. It is the panic of a person watching their false self slip away. Their superiority becomes a shield protecting them from the unbearable truth. They are ordinary, they are flawed, they are aging, they are losing influence. They are not who they claim to be. These truths threaten their entire psychological framework, so they respond by raising the walls higher. They enforce hierarchy everywhere they go. They need to be the smartest person in the room, the most experienced, the most moral, the most right. Disagreement becomes disrespect. Questions become challenges. Suggestions become insults. Anything that hints at equality feels like a personal attack, because equality destroys the only illusion they have left: the illusion of being above you. And when a narcissist feels that illusion slipping, they become dangerous. They humiliate to regain dominance. They dismiss your feelings to elevate themselves. They interrupt, correct, belittle, and overshadow you because your presence triggers the insecurity they refuse to admit. But here is the darkest part. Over time, they begin to believe their own mythology. The lies they told in their youth become the truths they defend in their old age. The stories they fabricated become the identity they protect. They enter a self-created world where they really are superior, morally pure, intellectually unmatched, consistently right. And because they believe this illusion, they demand that you believe it too. If you don't, you become the threat they must control, correct, shame, or silence. Their superiority is not an attitude, it is a fortress built out of denial, held together by fear, guarded by aggression. And anyone who steps too close risks becoming the enemy they need to defeat to feel powerful again. This is why their presence feels suffocating, why conversations feel like battles, why their approval becomes impossible, why their love becomes conditional, why their personality becomes harder, sharper, colder. They are fighting a war against reality itself, and you, simply by existing, simply by seeing them clearly, become evidence that their superiority is an illusion, and no illusion dies quietly. 6.5. They surround themselves with lackeys. As narcissists age, their world does not grow, it contracts, their relationships shrink, their tolerance narrows, their worldview hardens, and in that shrinking world, they begin constructing an ecosystem designed to protect their ego at all costs. This ecosystem depends on one thing: surrounding themselves with people who will not challenge them, people who will not question them, people who will not threaten the fragile illusion of superiority they cling to. These people, whether family members, co-workers, partners, or new acquaintances, become the narcissist's lackeys, the modern equivalent of flying monkeys. They are chosen carefully, not for their strength, but for their compliance. Narcissists do not seek equals, they seek mirrors. Mirrors that reflect admiration, loyalty, and agreement. Mirrors that never reveal anything the narcissist doesn't want to see. As their ego becomes weaker with age, their need for these mirrors becomes stronger. They handpick individuals who are inexperienced, insecure, dependent, emotionally naive, financially vulnerable, or simply exhausted enough to go along with their demands. And once they gather these people, they build a psychological fortress around themselves. Inside this fortress, the narcissist's delusions are never questioned. Their stories are believed, their lies are validated, their arrogance is applauded, their cruelty is justified, their victimhood is defended. They live inside a curated echo chamber where every voice echoes their own. This is why older narcissists often appear to grow more confident even as their lives crumble. They are surrounded only by people who tell them what they want to hear. But this echo chamber creates a far more dangerous dynamic than mere emotional dependency. It gives the narcissist a false sense of power, a sense of righteousness, a sense of moral superiority, and with that false empowerment comes weaponization. They use their lackeys for triangulation, pitting people against each other to maintain control. They use them as messengers, spreading smear campaigns, half-truths, and character assassinations on their behalf. They use them as shields, hiding behind them when confronted, claiming innocence while their lackeys do the dirty work. They use them as enforcers, applying subtle pressure, guilt, or intimidation to keep you in line. This is not accidental, it is strategic. The aging narcissist knows their direct power is weakening, so they outsource it. They manipulate through proxies. They control through alliances. They dominate through manufactured consensus. But here is the psychological truth. A person who cannot stand alone will always require others to uphold their illusion. And because the narcissist's illusion becomes more fragile with age, their dependence on lackeys becomes more extreme. This is why older narcissists can unleash entire networks against a single target, why family systems implode around them, why groups fracture, why workplaces become toxic under their influence. They cannot grow, so they gather followers who will shrink themselves to accommodate them. They cannot face truth, so they surround themselves with people willing to deny it. They cannot tolerate accountability, so they recruit those who will shield them from it. And the chilling reality is this: the more isolated a narcissist becomes from the real world, the more dangerous they are to anyone still trapped inside their curated world. Their lackeys do not just protect their ego, they amplify their delusion. And no delusion grows quietly. Signal 6. They rationalize every failed relationship. As the narcissist grows older, their life becomes a graveyard of relationships, marriages that collapsed, friendships that disintegrated, family bonds that withered, careers that stalled, alliances that fell apart. A normal person might look at this pattern and think, maybe I need to reflect. But reflection is impossible for a narcissist because responsibility is unbearable to them. So instead of learning from the wreckage, they rewrite it. They rationalize every broken relationship in ways that protect their ego and numb their shame. And the older they get, the more elaborate and delusional these rationalizations become. To the aging narcissist, every ex-partner was unstable, every friend was disloyal, every co-worker was jealous, every family member was overly emotional, dramatic, or impossible to please. No relationship ends because of their actions, no conflict arises from their behavior. No rejection has anything to do with their cruelty, neglect, or manipulation. In their story, they are always the victim of someone else's weakness. And with age, this narrative deepens into something darker, the belief that they have never done anything wrong. This is where the danger escalates dramatically, because when a person truly believes they are never at fault, they feel entitled to repeat the same behavior without guilt, without hesitation, without restraint. Why would they change if they are convinced the world keeps failing them? Why grow when it's easier to blame? Why reflect when denial offers comfort? The older they get, the more their rationalizations drift from reality. They retell stories with missing details, altered timelines, and inverted roles. They omit their aggression and exaggerate your reactions. They turn moments of conflict into moments of persecution. They turn boundaries you set into attacks against them. They turn consequences into proof that others mistreat them. This narrative protects them from ever confronting the uncomfortable truth. Their relationships failed not because everyone was flawed, but because they refused to grow. And as this worldview hardens, their hostility intensifies. Anyone who challenges their story becomes a liar. Anyone who remembers the truth becomes an enemy. Anyone who refuses to take their side becomes toxic. Anyone who holds them accountable becomes abusive. They cannot afford nuance, because nuance threatens the story they've built their identity on. Their rationalizations are not casual, they are survival mechanisms for a collapsing ego. And the more that ego collapses with age, the more aggressive their rationalizations become. This is why older narcissists often appear bitter, paranoid, and perpetually wronged. They genuinely believe life has betrayed them. They believe people are ungrateful. They believe the world has not recognized their greatness. This self-pity becomes their fuel, but it also becomes their justification. Justification for cruelty, justification for punishment, justification for emotional warfare. And the devastation of this dynamic is simple but brutal. The more they rewrite their past, the more dangerous they become in the present. Because a person who refuses to learn from their history is destined to repeat it. But a narcissist does not just repeat it, they magnify it, they escalate it, they weaponize it. Their rationalizations do not stay inside their mind, they bleed into every interaction, every relationship, every conflict. Their distorted reality becomes the battlefield you are forced to stand on, and because they cannot question their own narrative, they question you. They question your memory, they question your intentions, they question your sanity. And eventually, if you stay long enough, you begin to question yourself. This is the silent violence of the aging narcissist. They rewrite the past so convincingly that they drag you into the story and assign you the role that protects them, never the one that reflects the truth. And once you live inside someone else's rewritten reality, you lose pieces of your own. 6-7. They keep others permanently on the defensive. There is a point in a narcissist's aging process when manipulation stops being subtle and becomes a full-scale psychological strategy. By the time they reach this stage, they have lost the charm they once relied on, the relationships that once stabilized them, and the social influence that once hid their flaws. What remains is the one tactic they believe still works, keeping everyone around them permanently on the defensive. An aging narcissist has learned that if you are confused, apologetic, uncertain, or off balance, they win. If you doubt yourself, they don't have to face themselves. If you are too busy justifying your actions, you can't question theirs. And if you're always trying to calm them, explain yourself, correct misunderstandings, or repair emotional damage they caused, they stay in control of the narrative. This tactic becomes their lifeline, the oxygen of their collapsing ego, and with age, they refine it into a weapon of precision. They accuse you of things you didn't do. They reinterpret your words into insults you never said. They escalate small irritations into major betrayals. They twist innocent behaviors into hidden motives. They demand explanations for emotions you didn't even feel. They constantly imply that your intentions are questionable, your loyalty is shaky, your memory is flawed, and because they deliver these attacks with absolute conviction, you find yourself defending things that were never wrong in the first place. This is the psychological trap. The moment you defend yourself, you enter their game, a game where they set the rules, decide the score, and always declare themselves the victim. The older they get, the more relentless this becomes. They start arguments without warning, create conflict out of thin air, and criticize you for imaginary offenses. They weaponize disappointment, guilt, moral language, emotional duty, even your own empathy. They become experts at turning your virtues against you. Your kindness becomes weakness, your patience becomes permission, your forgiveness becomes an invitation for more abuse. And because they've spent a lifetime avoiding introspection, they cannot regulate the emotional chaos inside them, so they regulate you instead. They control your tone, your words, your reactions, your silence. They demand that you stay calm when they're raging, stay available when they withdraw, stay gentle when they're cruel, stay responsible when they're reckless. Their unspoken rule becomes, your job is to manage my emotions so I never have to. And when you fail to stabilize them, which you inevitably will, they blame you for the very instability they created. The older they get, the more they rely on this tactic to maintain a sense of superiority and control. Because when someone is constantly defending themselves, they are never questioning the narcissist. They never set boundaries. They never step back far enough to see the truth. This is why the aging narcissist becomes sharper, colder, more punishing. They need you off balance so they can feel steady. They need you confused so they can feel clear. They need you guilty so they can feel righteous. They need you small so they can feel large. And if you stop defending yourself, if you go silent, detach, walk away, or see through the manipulation, the narcissist experiences the one thing they cannot tolerate: loss of control. That is when their attacks escalate, when their narrative becomes more dramatic, when their accusations become more extreme, not because you did anything wrong, but because your clarity threatens the world they built on lies. The final danger is this: a person who keeps you permanently on the defensive is not trying to communicate, they're trying to disarm you. They don't want resolution, they want dominance. They don't want peace, they want psychological possession. And the older they get, the more determined they become to maintain this dynamic, because losing control of you means facing the one enemy they fear more than aging, more than loneliness, more than failure: themselves. The greatest misunderstanding about narcissists is the belief that time will eventually soften them, that age will humble them, that the years will teach them what empathy never could. But the truth is far more haunting. Narcissists do not age into wisdom. They age into rigidity. They age into denial. They age into the darkest version of themselves. For most people, life is a teacher. For the narcissist, life is an enemy. Every consequence becomes an injustice. Every failing becomes someone else's fault. Every loss becomes a reason to tighten their grip on the people still within reach. And as their external world shrinks, friends distancing, lovers leaving, family withdrawing, their internal world becomes a pressure chamber, a collapsing echo of the lies they've told, the control they've demanded, the humanity they've refused to cultivate. This is why they become more dangerous with age. The less they have on the outside, the more violently they cling on the inside. But here is the part that matters most. You cannot save them from themselves. You cannot love them into self-awareness. You cannot explain them into accountability. You cannot sacrifice enough to fill the emptiness they refuse to face. And the longer you stay in the gravitational pull of their collapsing ego, the more you lose pieces of yourself, your clarity, your peace, your intuition, your sense of what is real. Jung wrote that to confront a person with their shadow is to show them their own light, but the narcissist does not want light. Light exposes cracks in the mask. Light shatters illusions. Light reveals the truth they have spent a lifetime burying, and so they reject the light and anyone who carries it. That is where your path and theirs must split, because the true transformation in this story is not theirs, it is yours. When you finally see the narcissist clearly, without excuses, without hope that they will change, without the illusion that love can save them, you step into a different reality. A reality where you are no longer reacting to their chaos, no longer negotiating with their moods, no longer shrinking to avoid their anger. You step into a reality where you rise, where you grow, where your boundaries become the architecture of your freedom, where your silence becomes the language of sovereignty, where your withdrawal becomes the moment they lose access to your mind, your energy, your empathy, your future. And the most important truth is this: the narcissist becomes more dangerous with age. But the moment you choose yourself, they lose their weapon, because their danger was never about who they were. It was always about the power you didn't know you held. Once you reclaim that power, your voice, your clarity, your dignity, they cannot touch you. They cannot shape you. They cannot define you. They cannot drain you. Their collapse no longer pulls you down with it. Their chaos no longer becomes your responsibility. Their shadow no longer becomes your burden. You walk away not because you hate them, but because you finally love yourself enough to stop participating in their self-destruction. That is the ending they never saw coming. That is the ending that frees you. And that is the ending that transforms the rest of your life.